Today we're talking about the ABCs of ODC. Exploring the world of ODC is a really interesting topic at the moment. We've been waiting a long time to find out what's new, what's happening in this new exciting arena of OutSystems. And we've got three great speakers joining us today. We've got John Salamat from PhoenixDX, which is where I work. We've got Stuart Harris from Kiandra IT, and we've got Mike Samuel, also from PhoenixDX, talking on different topics to help us understand this platform better. So we've got submitting components to the ODC Forge, building extensions on OCD, and streamlining OutSystems 11 for ODC migration. So these are all really important topics that I'm sure all of you, if you haven't already come up against them, you will in the not so distant future. I'm lucky to call John a colleague. So John is a father. First of all and foremost, he's a senior tech lead at PhoenixDX and an OutSystems MVP. He started playing with computers and programming at a really young age. And he spent most of his career working with traditional languages like Microsoft and JavaScript. He came across OutSystems in 2018, and he knew that he was onto a good thing. It was kind of love at first sight, wouldn't you say, John? He has fully embraced the platform and is a great spokesperson for its strengths and benefits, and he'll be covering the Forge component submission in ODC. Over to you, John.
Thank you, Cecilia. I hope I didn't sound like a father of OutSystems in there.
No, you're just a wonderful father who happens to do OutSystems.
Surrounded by women in here, so 2 daughters. Lovely. So I'm here to kind of go around the basic because this is ABC of ODC. So some of it will be somehow obvious to some of you guys who have gone through the process of submitting Forge component. May it be on the old, I should not call it old, but the current OutSystems platform versus the next generation OutSystems platform, which is the ODC. So the topics that I'm looking to cover are, for some of you who are new to OutSystems, just covering what Forge is. There are different assets that could be shared in Forge, particularly when we get to the ODC. It's more granular than what it is before, and I'll cover that in this topic. Some prerequisites. So when submitting the component in the community, before it gets published, there are certain things that needs to be taken into account, certain information that needs to be filled in. The approval process. So when the component is submitted to OutSystems, there are group of reviewers that goes through the code that you have submitted. So they're looking through some licensing issues, things like that. So that's part of the approval process that I'll be covering. I hope that I'll be able to cite the differences between the current versus the ODC Forge. I kind of have like a couple of things that I found during the process. So bear with me here. The process or the experience that I do have in ODC relies on some certain period only, because ODC is pretty new, and this is a continuous next gen platform. So things are changing. So some of the things that I will say here might change as the platform progress. And hopefully I'll get to the demo where we'll be able to submit something in Forge. So let's start. In OutSystems, there's the repository for the community for the reusable patterns that has been created in OutSystems. Terminology-wise, you'll be seeing application and libraries. So at a high level, applications are modules or functionality that's encapsulated achieving certain use case, while library it's a component of an application that provides granularity. So it's a reusable piece of code that can be consumed by an application. So just as you go through the page of Forge, this is what you see on the screen right now. You'll be able to now see the new filter in this page. It's too little, but there's a new filter in there to say that it's a component that's made for ODC specifically. So just to cover the high level for the new audience that we do have in OutSystems, um, OutSystems is creating this next generation platform where we are looking to jump into it. It's already available and it's being used. And at some point, um, I think most of the apps will jump into this platform. So with this one, we got currently 300 Forge component out there that's specifically in ODC. Um, and that means we need your help because back from the original OutSystems, we got probably thousands, almost 10,000 of components in there. So we have a huge gap in terms of acceleration. I don't know any factory who doesn't have Forge in their environment. So Forge really helps accelerate things. And with that being said, hopefully by the end of this session, you'll be able to contribute together with us in increasing this number. So I mentioned this at a high level, the differences between apps and library. There's a categorization in terms of library. If you submit things in the ODC Forge, you'll be able to say which library are you submitting. In apps, it will always be a general one where you're saying that this is a template or demoing a certain use case. But when you're submitting a library, you have to categorize it in such a way the user will know where it is where is it supposed to be used. So logic utility, that's more focused on from the word itself, utility, things like if you have came across with math utility, a client side script where you have to do this different calculation. That's an example of a logic utility. You could build a library that has client action on it, and you could share that client action that could be reused by an application. Connector, I think a good example of this is where I'm advertising already the next presenter, Stuart. Extension is a good example of this, and Stuart will be covering how now complex that is in ODC to build a connector. UI patterns. If you think about OutSystems UI, forking that, even customizing that existing pattern means that you are already creating your own pattern, which you could submit to Forge. That's just one example, but of course you could build your own component. You could even pull in from another repository like npm or whatever you're comfortable with. UI themes. So if you're working a lot with CSS, this is the category for you. And mobile plugin, of course, with the native capability, things like where you would need to make use of the biometrics plugin, where you would need to make use of the camera plugin, and you're customizing it, creating experience on top of it, then you could categorize that as a mobile plugin. So getting into the checklist of things, getting into the details, and just probably a tip, you might need to note some of this things that I'm presenting, because at the end of this, we'll have a Kahoot. So just advertising that activity. So prerequisites of submitting Forge component, and most of these are existing on the current platform. Asset names must be unique. Like when you're creating that app or library in ODC Studio, that name must not exist on the OutSystems Community Forge ODC list. Um, when you're adding a new version on top of the existing one, the name must be the same. So changing the name will submit it as a separate app or separate library. So make sure on the process of upgrading your component, you don't change that name. Submit any dependencies first. So just like in OutSystems current platform, you would have a list of dependencies. So I can show you in a bit that when you have a component that has dependency, that can be seen in the Forge site, which is if we go in here and just pick any component, part of the dependency that you do have must be in OutSystems already. So on this case, this is a bad example because this is OutSystems UI, but any other dependency that you do have should be in Forge already. So if you have built multiple components and the component is a producer and the other component is a consumer, the producer must be submitted first before the consumer. Um, Obviously, they must have short description. So when it says short description from ODC Studio. Um, and right now, it's very strict that if you don't have that, you won't be able to even submit your application. You won't be able to see the application on the list. Um, Documentation guideline. While there's no specific way to document things, there's this best practices that OutSystems is suggesting to us. Things like at least covering the steps, um, and a number of steps is what they would like to suggest on how to consume your at least the library that you're generating, or if it's an application, how you would use it as a starting point to build an application. So I'll not go through the detail of that. There's a link. If you search that how to document Forge component, you'll be able to see immediately and jump to it. Um, the process of submitting a Forge component, it's just basically the approval part. Um, when you log into the ODC portal, so do note in here, it's not anymore saying about OutSystems community page, but it's particular to ODC portal. So when you have an ODC environment, you would have access to the portal where you could submit your Forge. And that's one of the changes that happened in OutSystems current platform versus the ODC. It's now very integrated on how you would submit the Forge component. Um, so with that ODC portal, you'll be able to select your application or your asset, the library that you need to submit, fill out the required details as how I mentioned on the prerequisite. And if upon submission, that won't be available yet on the community. So users won't be able to install that. Users won't be able to even see that from OutSystems Forge community page. Only by the time OutSystems Forge component team reviewed them and approve them, that's the only time they'll be able to install that component and be able to send feedback. So if there's a problem, there will be a email that will be sent to the producer or the one who submitted the Forge component, and yeah, modification needs to happen and another round of approval. So the keyword is there is, if it's submitted, it's not yet available immediately. There would be a review that would happen. Asset versioning, with apps, it's required for the app to get to the production before you can submit it to Forge. Um, that's because the version will be picked up based on how you version it on your environment. So the screenshot is a bit small, but what you can see there is the staging of the ODC. And as you get to the final stage of the wizard, it there you have the capability to change the version number in there. So for apps, that's available. You'll be able to customize the version number with that structure, major, minor, patch. With library, the difference is library is automatically versioned. You don't have to submit it to production. It could just reside on development environment, and with the process of submission, the patch will increase. The version on the patch will increase automatically, and that's being managed by the OutSystems Forge website. So the changes in ODC Forge, some of this I kind of skimmed through already. As of writing this, the submission process is very different. With the old one, you get to be very manual. You have to download the application from your environment, create an AOP, upload that to the community page, where you could access the submission of Forge, and that's where the review process will start. With ODC, it's integrated with your environment, and the submission process means that if it's within your environment, the it will tag accordingly to the environment who submitted it. And there's that part where support email, you will indicate that, and I'll show that to you in the demo. That will be the contact point and not your community account. I don't know how will that change in the future, but that's the major difference right now. There's no trusted badge yet, so if you are filtering out ODC plus a trusted badge, you won't be able to combine both at the moment. And I think that will happen. I just don't know when. Um, One of the things that I really find helpful in the ODC or now Systems Forge rather is the ability to get to like a trial page with Forge component. With ODC, that's not yet available, but there's an alternative. Like through documentation and things, you can build your own uh, link and integrate it with your documentation. So not really a big of a change in there. It's more of like just probably on navigation perspective. It's easier if you have that demo that's part of the downloading of the component. And if you have experienced that on the OutSystems Forge in the past, you would know what I'm trying to say here, that it's easier to understand the component if there's a demo that's part of it. Um, so I think I'm jumping into a demo right now. So in here, you'll probably see me struggle on things. So bear with me if I commit mistakes. But yeah, let me open up ODC. Um, I have here, I have a previous Forge component that I would like to convert to an ODC. Um, it's called hand track. We'll not focus so much on the content of this Forge component, but at a high level, this is written to kind of track the different. It's an AI technically that's written in JavaScript. It's from Tensor framework, so we're just porting it to ODC. I have here, so to save time, I have here an OutSystems 11. I got this block, camera block. So that's the component that I do have. When you use that block in your page, you'll be able to see, um, and this is the part where I mentioned that try now is effective. And apologies, I have to turn off my camera because this one will make use of my other camera. Um, so it's kind of tracking. That's the component that we will be transferring to ODC. Um, so with that being said, I'll open up here ODC side by side, um, and we'll create what do you guys think would be the right category for this one. I would say probably a UI component, because you're working with a specific component that can be run, may it be in web, so it's not a native plugin, and it's a component that you can drag on your page. So and it encompasses a UI perspective. So I'll just name it the same, hand track, and hopefully I do have here. Yep. So icon would be good. And this is the part where you would want to be filled in. It's required. So I'll just do a cheat in here and copy this part. And create a library. Excuse me. And I'll just have a blocks in here. UI flow, and as you can, I want you guys to see that I could just copy paste easily from OutSystems to ODC. There are things that there will be difference as you copy and paste, so make sure you are aware of that. There are parts of OutSystems, the cloud development, that would make it immediately available to the public. So because when you're working with library in ODC, you're towards creating reusable component. So in OutSystems, um, it's tagged as private by default. With ODC, you'll see that as you copy paste, and I can show that to you in a bit. So with blocks, I copy that. I'm missing the script, so I'll just transfer that as well. And this is the part where I need to copy as well some of the things that's part of the component structure. So this is where you can see difference. This is unmodifiable from ODC, and without systems, that's sorry, with ODC, that's automatically tagged as public because you're technically exposing this block. So it automatically says that assigns that public modifier um, instead of giving you option to change it. Um, so that's one of the things that I found. And with that, I think we're all good to publish this. I'm using an environment that's for partner. So I'm not sure if we will be able to submit this as is, but we'll go through the process of the steps in submitting it. So that has been published. We got the prerequisites. We got the short description. We got a name that's unique. I don't think that exists in ODC. Last time I checked, that doesn't exist. So the next thing we want to do is you could go to this link, install from Forge, or you could just go to your ODC portal. In ODC portal, under on the lower left, you'll be able to see assets in there, which is under Forge. So anything under that menu means you're working for Forge. This one is where you would want to install things on your environment. But on our case, we're focused on submitting. So let me just go through that. And so these are the applications available in your environment. You could see, because it doesn't follow the prerequisite, you won't be able to select them. Either it's an app that hasn't gone to production, so there's no versioning, or it doesn't have the short description, not enough for you to submit to Forge. But let's see, Anshak. Yep, so there it is. I selected the app. You could see the versioning. It's a minor version of 1, and it doesn't have a patch version yet because this is the first time we are submitting it to Forge. And this is where you get to just fill in the different things in here. Detailed description. I should not just copy paste that. I should have more detailed description in there, but just for sake of demo, I'll tag this as UI pattern as mentioned. I'll just get the image, same image as that. Limitation, I'll say probably I have something in here. Depending on camera used, the result might vary. And team contact, I'll just send my email in there. And the next step would be providing the documentation. I have here something that's ready as well. I should have more steps in there, but just for the sake of demo, I'm just saying that consume the camera blab and add a handler for the event. After doing that, you'll be seeing this summary and different things that's part of that input fields that you filled in are in here. And as you submit that, that will go to that process of review from the Forge team. Oops. Yep. I think what I did here is I have another environment where at least we got to see that there's that naming checking. I got another environment where I already submitted a contract that's in pending review. So that's the part where we have to be cautious of. If I go to that environment, so I have another environment here. I have another environment here, which that hand track is there, and I submitted that already. If we need to version it, we could just go to the ODC Studio. If we do some modification on top of the library that was submitted, it will automatically know that there was a modification, and you can resubmit the app. So in here, submit to Forge, and hand track is there, which I do have a modification. So you'll see here, let's say I already did an initial submission. There's now a modification, and you can see the patch is added, like 0.1 has been added, and there's a release notes because I'm now adding a modification on top of the original one. So there's a versioning now that's involved. And that's how you manage the assets in Forge with these simple steps that I mentioned.
Good job, John. Great. I was compelled, and I'm not a programmer, so good job. Okay, so our next speaker is the affable Stuart Harris, who is a tech lead at Kiandra. So Stuart's going to now start sharing his screen while I'm talking about him, because his ears are burning. So Stuart is a tech lead at Kiandra and is an OutSystems champion. I think we're all OutSystems champions deep down in our hearts. He has been coding in OutSystems for 6 years, building solutions in the insurance, real estate, employment, government, and health sectors. He enjoys stretching out systems to its limits. He is a practitioner of dad jokes, and he has an endless supply of movie references. You'll see what I mean. Stuart will be talking about building extensions in ODC. Or is it in ODC or on ODC? I'm not sure. I keep going back and forth. In or on?
It's a very good question, and I'm not going to answer it because I don't know either.
Like sometimes I'm saying in ODC, sometimes I'm saying on. I'm not really sure what the correct one is, but they both feel wrong. But I'll leave it with you, Stuart, to talk about the nuances of language and how we're building extensions in ODC.
Thank you very much. Hi, I'm Stuart Harris. I'm from Kiandra, software development lead. We're going to talk about building extensions in ODC. So we'll talk about external logic and connections, documentation and sample files, prerequisites, then actually the coding part, defining the interface, implementing the interface, then preparing a package and uploading it to ODC, and then what could go wrong. Right. So external logic and connections. Extensions in OutSystems 11 have been broken out into the two separate parts, external logic and connections. So let's have a look at connections. Now I'm going to have to, I haven't shared my screen properly, so I'm going to stop presenting and present and select the window again. This is going to be, oh no, entire screen. There we go. Got it. Finally. Okay, so this is what connections looks like. It's basically just a database connection, and you go through the process. I'm not really going to focus on that at all today, but it's been split out into that and external logic, which is this. So external logic is basically the .NET code type of extension, and that's really what we're going to talk about. So going back to here. So the documentation is great. So basically don't listen to me, just go and read the documentation and you'll be fine. But here is the link. I'm sure you'll just be able to find it if you like Google ODC external libraries. But I think we'll be making the slides available. Now, there are 3 sample files available for external logic in ODC. There's a basic one, an advanced one, and a SOAP one. So the basic one really is the absolute minimum that you need. Thanks, Cecilia. The basic one's the absolute minimum that you need. It's just got one method in a function, and if that's all you need, use that sample, and you'll be able to create your external logic. The advanced one shows all of the different things that you can do. So if you're doing more than, if you're using structures, you're using, you want to name things a bit more, use the advanced one. I suggest you use the advanced one anyway, and that's what I'll show you today. And then there's a SOAP sample file, which essentially makes a SOAP call. So it makes a SOAP web API call. All right, fascinating. Now, prerequisites. Don't we love prerequisites? So the prerequisites to external logic are: you need .NET 6.0 SDK on your machine. You need an IDE. See, I can read what's on the slide. You need an IDE that supports building .NET 6 projects, so Visual Studio. Community Edition is fine, and is for OutSystems 11 as well. Visual Studio Code with some C# stuff in it, or JetBrains Writer if you're into JetBrains stuff. You also need basic knowledge of C# programming, or ability to Google basic knowledge of C# programming. All right, there we go. Now get ready for code. Just give you a chance to prepare. Okay, now I'm just going to jump over to Visual Studio here. But before I do, essentially, you need to define your interface to your logic. Same as you do in OutSystems 11 with the Integration Studio, except there's no Integration Studio in ODC. It's like you're doing the lower level coding without having the nice sort of application that wraps it for you. But I actually think it's easier, to be honest. So don't be afraid. I'm sure you're not. So you create an interface. You have to put an OS interface attribute on your interface. That is the minimum requirement. If you only do that, that's all you need to be able to publish. You have to implement, of course, but that's the only special thing you need. Add your methods. Any structures need the OS structure attribute on their code. So let's have a look. This is what it looks like. So here is our public. So this is the advanced sample, by the way. So this is an interface, and fantastic in the sample that they've chosen something that begins with I already. So your interface has I on it. I'll just shut up and move on, I think. So we've got our OS interface attribute. It has a description, and maybe I'll just put on word wrap to try and find word wrap. No, can't even find it. So never mind. Just try to open. It's got an icon resource name. So little note: if you do want to publish your external logic to the Forge, it needs to have an icon. You can publish it internally without the icon, but it means you're going to publish it to Forge. I've said right. And okay, so then notice this function here, this parse function, has a structure. Let's have a look at that structure. It's got its OS structure attribute, and it has a description. So this is just the same stuff that you actually see in OutSystems 11 Extension Studio. It's just they're in attributes. They're not in that kind of clunky, hard to use UI. Did I say that? And for each structure field, you can have a definition. So you've got description is mandatory. I'll go through what all these are. So that's what it looks like. So let's just jump back to slides over here. These are the data types that are supported. It's pretty much the same as OutSystems 11, just basic .NET data types, plus any structure that you define using the aforementioned data types with the OS structure attribute, and any lists, which is anything that inherits from IEnumerable. So IEnumerable string, or it could be list string or IList string, whatever. So those are the types that you can use. Hide the stop sharing thing, Stu. So these additional attributes, so the OS action is what you put on your interface to say this is the action description. Now the return type, but those things will be picked up by default by OutSystems. The important one, or one of the important ones, is the return name. If you don't put the return name in, it'll work. It'll just put, but what that is it's the name of the parameter that when you expose it in OutSystems, it's the name of the return parameter. If you don't put anything in there, it'll be the full name of the function. So when you're using it, it'll kind of be what name of the action. So it'll be the action name dot the action name again as the return type, which I kind of don't like. So I always put in the return name. So do that. Code like I do. Then when I code review, I won't complain. Icon resource. So you can put in an icon resource on the actions as well, just like you can put in actions in your extensions. Now the original name, this is interesting. So this is how OutSystems works out if your action has changed. So, you know, if you change an action in a module and change the name of it, and then you update the next module that's using it, that action will just, it'll go, oh, that's just the same action. I'll just update all the usages of it. The way it does it here is you have to put the original name of the action in the attribute tag. So if you change it, leave the original name the same, and OutSystems will take care of it for you, and everything will be rainbows and unicorns. All right, so parameters, you can put attributes on parameters with a data type description. Again, it'll be picked up automatically, but you should put descriptions on things. An OS structure field, same again. And then if you have a method in your C# that you don't want to expose, you can put OS ignore on it, or just make it private. But you know, you can put OS ignore on it if you really have to make it public. Okay, what else? Implement the interface. Well, it's kind of, let's have a look. It's kind of straightforward. Let's have a look. IBAN checker. So we just, if you're familiar with C#, you'll know that that's just how you inherit from an interface. If you're not, Google it and then you'll know. But we just implement our method. We don't have to have any of the attributes. Here's all your .NET comments. If you're wondering about, I don't know, does it still do this? If you do 3 of them, it automatically puts it there. Yeah, great. So do that. But just implement your action. Saying over and over and just move on. Okay, now you've built your external logic feature component, assembly, whatever. Now you have to build it and zip it up so you can upload it. So this is how you build it. Notice it says the type is Linux x64. So that's what ODC is running on. Must be. So we just call .NET publish, and that will put it in this release.NET 6 Linux x64 publish folder. And here is a nice little PowerShell script that will zip this up for you and give it the name that you want it to be. Now, here's an interesting thing. The name that it appears in as in ODC Studio just comes from the name of the zip file. So get the name of the zip file right. And if we go over here, they've got it even, I think they've got a simpler deployment thing, which I can't find. So never, oh no, here it is. It's even got setting the PowerShell execution policy. So with mine, you probably get an error because probably haven't set that. But don't call it external library. Call it you know what you want your thing to be called. Right. How am I going for time? Right. Then we just go and upload it to ODC. So let's go and have a look, shall we? Create library. So we just go and upload a file. Let's go and grab a. Oh no, that's so. So this sample file here thing, you can download it from there, but it'll only just give you one of them. So these sample files are on GitHub. So I don't know, get them from there. All right. So let's go and choose a file. And now this has got an error, and see what happens. Right, it couldn't upload it. Let's have a look at the errors. There are errors in your file that need to be fixed. Right, so let's have a look at the, oh, I can download some logs. Isn't that nice? No OS interface found in your file. So we didn't have the OS interface attribute on anything. I can confirm for you, that one doesn't have. Now, the OutSystems documentation, again, is awesome. It's got all of the possible errors documented with instructions of what to do. So you're not going to have any possible problems, I guarantee you. Don't believe me. But that's it. So thanks. Now go and make lots of external logic components. Cheers. Back to you, Cecilia.
Fantastic. Good job. Good job. Riveting stuff. I think my favorite quote was Google it and then you'll know. I love that. Very good advice. Very good advice. Okay, so our next speaker is queuing up to share his screen. Mike is an associate tech lead and senior developer with PhoenixDX. He's been using OutSystems for 6 years and is an accredited OutSystems trainer. So he knows all about the courses. So hit him up for some advice. He enjoys the flexibility of the solutions that he can build with OutSystems, and he applies this to his daily work and to the volunteer work that he does for amazing organisations like Impact for Women in Melbourne. Today, Mike will talk about some of the challenges you might face when migrating from OutSystems 11 to ODC. Over to you, Mike.
Thank you very much. So yes, we're going to talk about migrating from OutSystems 11 to ODC. And in a perfect world, we would have a one-step migration process from our O11 applications to ODC and everything would just work. However, no such tool exists and may never exist. And we'll see some of the reasons for that during this presentation. So we need to plan our application migration to the new paradigm of ODC. Some things that we're going to consider is it has to be a reactive web application to start with. To make it easy. Otherwise, we are looking at a complete rebuild of your traditional web apps. With the architecture, we're going to start with the concept that modules are no more within ODC. So we'll need to redesign our architecture with that in mind. Components that that our application might rely on. There's some Forge components, UI elements, integrations, etc. So migrating them will be part of our success. And then data, we'll look at the change in underlying database technology that could impact the code and how we interact with it. So reactive web only, native compatibility is only with reactive web at the moment. OutSystems 11 platform will be supported at least until 2027. And then OutSystems 11 applications will be transitioned to a runtime on ODC. It's not exactly clear yet if that's going to include traditional web. There might be some smarter brains on here that might be able to advise on that, but traditional web may not be supported on that ODC OutSystems 11 runtime. So they'll exist within that runtime on ODC, but not be cloud native. So they won't have the benefits of being cloud native with the scalability, etc. With the architecture, we're used to in OutSystems, particularly in OutSystems 11, of having a 3-layer canvas, with modules that we identify as end user, core, and library modules. And we have a separation of business logic and business agnostic elements. And then we're all used to, as applications grow in complexity and size, of having a spaghetti reference architecture that we all try to avoid. And so that's one of the consequences of that kind of architecture. With ODC, we actually end up with what is effectively a two-layer canvas. So you can see there's no more modules. We just have applications and we have libraries. So applications replace the concept of modules, kind of compresses it all down. And then libraries contain that business agnostic UI and logic elements. They're highly reusable, and libraries are actually packaged with applications, meaning you can have different library versions deployed with different applications. So when looking at a typical OutSystems 11 application composition, you can see that these are grouped into applications that are defined based on business units. We have our end user applications, our core applications, and our foundation applications. So modules are grouped based on the logical grouping. Each application is aligned with business concepts, life cycles, and business owners and sponsors, and they're aligned around the life cycle. In an ODC application, in a very similar way, but without the modules, applications are aligned around those same concepts, business concepts, life cycles, owners, and sponsors, without breaking down into those modules. And in this example, we can see application A is focused on user interfaces for web and mobile. Application B has the microservices and REST APIs. Application C has the asynchronous processing. And then we have our libraries with our reusable UI patterns, themes, wrappers, and logic utilities. Each library has a specific purpose, making sure that it's highly reusable. So as we're looking at our application within an OutSystems 11 context, what we need to do is go through that disclose, organize, and assemble process that we do when we are going through a normal discovery of an application. But now we're looking at it within the light of taking an application that exists within the ODC structure. So we need to flatten the structure and then realign the purposes of each of those applications. So we could look at how we break that apart and how we compress it as well. In general, one business concept, one business owner, one business sponsor equals one application. In our new ODC application, we can see that applications can consume items. So you can see that application A and application B can consume, but only as weak dependencies. References to libraries are strong dependencies. Entities only exist within applications. Static entities can exist within applications and libraries, but they behave differently. So when defined in libraries, a static entity is more like an enumerated type rather than a database entity. And then all libraries consumed are packaged within applications in the container. So even though there's a direct correlation between application B and the library beneath it, the second library will actually be packaged in with the first application as it's a strong reference. So that's looking at the structure of our applications. So if we were to now look at assessing our components and extensions, as mentioned by John earlier, the Forge can be filtered by platform, and you can see that currently there's 293 ODC specific Forge components, and that number is constantly growing. So when we're looking at our application, what we want to do is assess our existing inventory. We need to look at our code and our external references, and we need to make an assessment on whether or not those Forge components or external elements are available within the OutSystems ODC Forge, or whether we need to make them available to us and create them. So we need to see if there's compatibility with what we're trying to migrate from OutSystems 11 to ODC. Then we need to determine how much effort is required to make it compatible. So there's obviously going to be a cost involved in that as you do that, but the most important thing is to make it available on the Forge for the rest of the community to make use of. Grow the number of those assets that are available. If we were to look at the data elements of the differences between OutSystems 11 and ODC, OutSystems 11 is typically based on Microsoft SQL Server, although obviously can be done on Oracle or other database types. But in ODC, it's actually based on Amazon Aurora, which is a cloud-native, high-performance availability at global scale with full MySQL and PostgreSQL compatibility. As a result of that, when you move aggregates and entities from OutSystems 11 into ODC, they'll automatically be created and optimized when you copy them across. However, with the advanced SQL nodes that you might have in your existing application, we might need to rewrite those, as the language between those two queries are not the same between what's in a Microsoft SQL Server and what's in Aurora SQL. So there's this great link on the OutSystems documentation that shows the comparison between an OutSystems 11 and ODC equivalent. And so when you do have those fairly lengthy advanced SQL queries in your application, you will need to assess them each individually to make sure that they will be compatible with Aurora and make any changes aligned with that. So as I said, the documentation is there. The link will be in the slides that will be sent out. And then you can see what changes you'll need to make across your application. The other element to consider with data and between O11 and ODC is data migration. And so that's going to be particularly important when you have a production application and how you're going to handle that. So this entire topic is too large to cover in great detail here on all the different strategies you could potentially use. But you certainly need to take into account the production data and how we're going to move that between the OutSystems 11 context and ODC. How to obviously handle downtime when you are moving between one application, one platform and the other. And then any issues that you might have of migration between data types. Between the databases, you could have changes in the databases, data types and structures as well. And then one potential thing that you could do is look at the impact on application performance. But there's a potential that you could use an external database and link your new ODC application to your existing database. But that'll definitely have performance issues. And then you're going to have to deal with the legacy issue of moving that data across at some point at any stage. So it's best to deal with that at the beginning of the migration process. So when it comes to migrating code from O11 to ODC, as we saw with John's example, it's actually quite easy. It's just a matter of copying and pasting. And so generally you copy and paste your entities first. So once you've decided your structure and you created those shells within ODC Studio, you can copy your entities, your client, server, and service actions. But as I've noted here, if you copy a server action and it has a public property set to yes, once you paste it, it'll actually generate an error in ODC Studio. And that's because you cannot have public server actions within an application. They have to be wrapped within a service action. And that's the only way that they can be consumed by other applications, ensuring that weak dependency is maintained. Then you can copy across your UI elements and timers. Now, you're obviously going to have some errors that could generate as a result of that. So it's important to review each of those and eliminate them as you go through. So just some things to note regarding ODC and migrating across to that. So as mentioned before, only weak dependencies are allowed between applications. Consuming elements from libraries creates strong dependencies, which is how those libraries are then packaged within the ODC application. Application and library settings are configured within ODC portal at the application level. So you can have settings which are your settings that you create at either an application or library level, but when you go to set those within ODC portal, you won't find them at the library level. They'll actually be configured and set at the application level, which is a bit of a change from OutSystems 11. Roles are not public and they cannot be shared across applications. So the suggestion from OutSystems on how to deal with a role that exists across different applications is to actually create the roles in each application, making sure they have the exact same name, and then you can assign that role or each of those roles to the person that requires it. So it's a little bit of a clunky workaround at this stage, but that's the aim with roles within applications. So again, needs to be considered when moving your existing application across. So entities should be stored in their most relevant application. So we're quite used to using core services modules within OutSystems 11 and putting our database entities there with our wrappers, CRUD wrappers, etc. But the advice from OutSystems is to actually store the entities in the application that it's most relevant to. Each of those database entities exist within an isolated Aurora server, which I've got on, I think, on the next page. But so they are accessible to each other on a database level, but that's just the alignment that they suggest. BPT is not yet available. So if you have an application with business process technology, it's not currently available within ODC. Timers are, however, and so that's the progression towards a little bit of automation. Libraries can consume a REST service, but not expose one. And applications can consume and expose a REST service. Applications are deployed separately as individual containers. So that means you need to produce applications before you can deploy a consumer application. And so the way that it works currently within ODC portal when you do a deployment is it will show that the producer is not available, but it won't stop you from deploying that container. So it's a matter of doing one application at a time per deployment and then working your way through to make sure all the producers are there before the consumers. And hotfixes across stages is not currently possible and can only be implemented in the development stage. So when you deploy an application, you're actually deploying or moving the container between your different stages. So if you need to do a hotfix in your pre-prod, like we can with OutSystems 11, you can't actually do that in ODC. So you need to consider that as part of your deployment process. The workaround seems to be you go to the version number that requires the change on your dev environment, make the change in that version number, and then deploy that version across your stages, and then incorporate those changes in your most recent version of the application. And I think we've got this last one. Each stage has its own isolated Amazon Aurora serverless database. So as I mentioned, all the entities exist on the same database. They're accessible to you. So when you do joins across the different entities that exist within each application, they are talking to it themselves rather than talking across different containers. Thank you, Cecilia.
Good job.
Question for John about major and minor version numbers, and
Right.
Yeah, go ahead.
There was in versioning, I think had it on chat, but just for us to say it out loud. For apps, you have a control as you stage the application, and that would be picked up from your staging environment on how you move things to production. In library, yes, it will be automatically assigned by the OutSystems by incrementing the patch. So the versioning is major, minor, patch. Yep.
It'd be interesting to see how it knows to update the minor and the major, I reckon.
Haven't came across with that, so
I think I might have a play with that and see what happens.
Yeah, that was my question. I have another one, if I can, Cecilia, for Michael.
Go for it. We're here to talk.
I think to Michael and data migration. How can you connect to the ODC when you are migrating from 11 an app to migrate production data. Is there already any documentation, sorry, or information about how you can load the data into ODC environments?
No, I don't think there's any specific documentation on that. The main thing to be concerned about is your referential integrity. So I know there are some tools available, third-party tools that OutSystems partners have created that allow you to or facilitate the migration of data, maintaining the referential integrity between different databases. Whether that's been tested in ODC, I'm not sure yet, but that's probably the main concern on how to interact with that.
Yeah, I'm a partner who has one of those referenced applications, and we still don't have that information, unfortunately.
Right.
But thank you. I was here trying to see if you had more information than me. Okay, thanks.
And there's a question in chat from Andy. Does anyone know if we're expecting tooling for migrations in the future from OutSystems? Surely manual copy and paste. Could be replicated by tooling. Well, it's probably for John, I have to say, or Mike.
Yeah, I was just going to say that the copy and paste is the easy part, but getting the architecture right when you're compressing your front-end user modules and your service modules into different ODC applications, I think that's where you need to have some manual intervention, and there may not be any way to automate that with any reliability.
Yeah, so it's just going to stay manual for now, at least.
If I can add, in the OutSystems One conference here in Lisbon, there was a talk in which it was mentioned that OutSystems is building documentation on how to execute this migration from O11, I don't know if React Native or whatever, into ODC. And they mentioned they will start by the simplest use cases, and then they will keep adding into that documentation and also tools that OutSystems will be creating to help in this migration. And what they requested of us was give us this request, and give us the situations, the use cases with the clients that they have these types of interest in migrating from O11 into ODC. And OutSystems will prioritize from the initial that they are working on documentation and tools to be able to then go into more complex cases as the requests from clients that are interested in migrating come in. That's what was said on the One conference.
Fantastic. Thanks for sharing that, Bruno. Osama said something similar and along those lines because he has just come back from the One conference as well. So it seems like it's something that OutSystems is aware of and on top of, which is great. Please sign up for Dev Digest, which is a monthly or so, don't hold me to it, newsletter that I send out from PhoenixDX. And it's a great way to stay on top of everything dev tip wise. We send out dev tips from us, from our developers, and also from OutSystems as well. And any of these events as well are also advertised there. I just want to say thank you everybody for joining in. If you have any questions for our guys, you can feel free to reach out to them on LinkedIn. I'm sure that they won't mind you sliding into their DMs. So have a great night, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Hey, everyone. See you guys.
Thank you.